So next up, we've got a very special guest. We've got Ito. This is going to be her first time talking, and she's been preparing very hard. She really loves this topic. She was like telling me, look, I do forecasting day in, day out. So I'm really excited to hear her talk about this. And I think this is the best audience to have her start her speaking career in. So yeah, please welcome, give a warm welcome to Ito.
Hi everyone. So we're going to talk about PPC forecasting today. A lot of people find this very confusing, me included when I started. So this is just going to be coming from my perspective when it comes to this, but hopefully this will equip you with a nice, simple flow for PPC forecasting and just debunk everything that you've ever thought about it. Contrary to what everyone thinks, it's actually not that difficult, hopefully using this tactic, but if you still think so, do let me know. So, a wise statistician called George Box said, essentially all models are wrong, but some are useful. And this is the best way to approach PPC forecasting. Largely because you're not a genie, you can't predict the future, you're never gonna get it 100% accurate. But you can use a nice model and some formulas that can get you as close to the goal as possible. So that's basically what we're here to discuss today. But first, a little bit about me. So I'm Ito. I'm an associate account director at Reprise Digital. Been in PPC 4 years, agency side, working mostly on e-commerce clients. So I would say I'm an e-commerce and shopping specialist a little bit. And in my spare time, I run a consultancy called Digital Consulting and make a bit of digital marketing content here and there. But moving on to the fundamentals. So when I was thinking about PPC forecasting and making it into a nice clean process, I think it can best be compared to making a pizza. And here's why. So when you make a pizza, you first flatten and shape your dough. So that means you validate your data sets, make sure they're trustworthy, and that you can use them because they are the building blocks of your forecast. Then you add the sauce. So this is building out your base forecast template, just to make it nice, easy, and automated for you to get the numbers that you need. Then you add the toppings. So this is sense checking your initial forecast, making sure that there's no abnormalities, making sure all the numbers make sense, are in line with historical data. Then you finish with the cheese. So if you do find out there's abnormalities with your initial forecast, you iron them out, you fix them, then you bake to perfection and actualize and reforecast if needed, because biggest takeout I want people to take out from this is that a forecast is a living document. You don't just forecast and put it away, you keep reforecasting. So, moving on to validating your data. So, like I said, data is the building block of everything we do as PPCers, we know this, and is the basis of your forecast. If your data is not trustworthy or it's not great, your forecast is not going to be great either, and that is what we do not want. So, with this, I recommend going to any data source of truth that you use. For some people, that's SA360 or Google Ads, even Google Analytics if you use that. But a lot of the time, we're forecasting for revenue and sales, so you need a platform that has the capability to produce these. And when you're forecasting, you want to make sure that you segment your data. So the segmentation depends on the length of time you're forecasting for. So if you're doing, for example, a yearly forecast, you might want to segment by month, quarterly by week, or if you're doing like a monthly forecast, maybe by day. That's all depending on your context. Then you want to look at your data set. Investigate any abnormalities in the data, potentially exclude these if they don't make sense and there's no context, but do investigate. And if you don't have data, so I know a lot of people may be onboarding a new client or beginning a Google Ads account for a new client, you can actually model this data. So if, for example, you brainstorm or kind of find some keywords that you think your client should be bidding on across different points in the funnel, you can use Keyword Planner and Reach Planners to get some average CPCs, some potential budgets for future months that could help. Google Trends for seasonality, so just to see how things perform over the course of the year. And then SEMrush for any competitor analytics or any other analytic platform that you use just to compare what competitors are in the market and make provisions for those. So just to exemplify this data, this is a bit grainy, apologies, but here we have a data set for a whole entire year. So we can see that GA revenue is in black or dark grey, and then we have the spend bars at the bottom. Now, with any data set, you're going to have peaks and troughs. So this is just an example of how to investigate those and provide context. So first, red box of the year, we can see that we have no GA revenue at all. This is very scary and largely indicates tracking issues. So you want to look into these and basically contextualize this. Maybe exclude this as well if you don't have any previous data to work with from the previous year. Then we have another box, so we can see that the revenue is trucking along quite nice, apart from that dip there. Again, could indicate a tracking issue, could also be something in the year that affected revenue growth or spend. For example, last year we had the Queen's death, a lot of companies turned off their activity for that. So that could explain these kind of things. And then the last box, we have a big spike in GA revenue, and we can see that it's between Q4, October, November time. So that's Black Friday. So type of context that you need to aid your forecast and kind of bring your data to life. So once we validate our data, we want to build our base forecast table. So just to get into this a bit more, a lot of the time clients give us budgets to forecast from. We'll say that we have this X amount of budget to spend on a particular tactic all year. So what we want to do is split that budget for each tactic by category or account based on how you operate your accounts basically. Now we'll get into this on the next slide, but what you want to do as well when you're building your base forecast table is just to use past data to populate contextual metrics. So you can use, for example, if you're forecasting maybe for April 2023, you might want to use the average order value, CPC, click-through rate and conversion rate from April 2022, just to model for your forecast. We would expect that it would follow historical trends, unless you're working on an e-commerce client, for example, and they may have slightly increased their prices over the course of the year. That may affect average order value, and competition may affect CPC. And then what you want to do is also populate the calculated metric cells with the correct formulas. So I like to automate my forecast, I don't know about you, because I don't like doing all the manual working out all the time. This saves a lot of time. You can populate any additional metric cells with formulas, and this will just automatically update once you update your base or contextual metrics. So just to exemplify this again, we have budget by category and account. So we have 3 accounts here. What I like to do is just follow a very logical approach when it comes to splitting my budget and allocating my budget. We can see that account B produced the most revenue, so about 10.5 million, which is about 54% of the revenue contribution. Logically, it makes sense to allocate most of our budget here, just because if our revenue is our KPI, which is the assumption on this slide, yeah, it's driving the most of our KPI, so we'd want to put our budget there, and then vice versa for the other accounts. Another main thing to note as well is that what is not included on here is return on ad spend, and that's also very important. So an account may be driving a lot of revenue because there's a lot of spend attached to it and have the opportunity to do so, but may have a lower return on ad spend. So that's definitely something we take into account. I would definitely prioritize return on ad spend over revenue contribution, especially if there's more opportunity to drive revenue in those particular accounts or categories. Then, just before we get into our base forecast table, to exemplify this more, we have to talk about the 2 different types of forecasts that we usually do. This is taken from my personal experience. So we have headroom analysis and performance projection. So performance projection is just a regular forecasting for future campaign performance. So this is like your year-on-year forecast if you're forecasting anything in the future, for example. And then headroom analysis, this is the one that I do all the time, because clients are always like, how much additional results can we get from X amount of budget? Or how much additional search impression can we get from X amount of budget? This is the type of forecast that you would run. And the reason that we're just differentiating these is just because your base forecast table will differ for both of them. So here we have a base forecast table for performance projections, Base metrics or contextual metrics that you take from historical data are highlighted in black, so that's the ones we discussed earlier, and then the calculator metrics, where you put in the formulas to just calculate these manually once the black ones are updated are there. These are the main things that you do. If you update the cost, you can find your perfect mix of everything else, and vice versa, but these are the core ones that you would need for a performance projection. And then for headroom analysis, you need these additional ones. So just to quickly go back to this, search impression share loss to budget is highlighted because when it comes to forecasting, this is a very, very key metric. It's just because it shows the amount of opportunity you could have got from additional budget, and that is a great place to base your forecast off. So that is basically the key metric when it comes to headroom analysis. So with headroom analysis, what we potentially do is just turn our search impression share loss to budget into impressions through a formula. I can provide that after if you want, just because I have loads of these in my archives. And then from here, we can calculate the additional cost, projected search impression share with that additional cost, and then the additional clicks, impressions, and revenue that we will get. So all of this is formulated, so it just makes it easier. Once you've populated the base metrics, all of this also will populate itself. So great, easy, perfect way to forecast, basically. So once we have split our budget by account, we've also built our base forecast table. We want to start getting a bit more granular and categorizing our forecast. So the way I like to do it is, if I have an overall budget to forecast from, I'll split it by account, but I'll also split it by tactic and engine, largely because different tactics perform differently and different engines perform differently. So we know, for example, shopping has a higher return on ad spend than text ads generally, and Google has more volume than Bing. So if you split these out, you can forecast more accurately, and then you're not misrepresenting any numbers, basically. So similar way we do it, I like to work based on percentages and logic. So similar way we did it for account, that's how we're going to do it for engine and for tactics. So I'm going to exemplify these just to hit these home. So forecasting by engine, here's like a data set split by Google and Bing, which is majority of what the engines that we use on a day-to-day basis. So as usual, we can see that a lot more volume is going through Google, but then Google is also driving a lot of the cost, most of the sales, but the main things to pay attention to are the revenue, the average order value, and the return on ad spend. So Google drives the most revenue. It's doing so because people are spending slightly more on Google, and then it also has a higher return on ad spend than Bing. So you definitely want to funnel more of the budget that you're allocating into Google than Bing, just because you're going to get more return, you're going to get more efficiency on your budget. So that's a key rule of thumb when it comes to engine split. And then here we have it by tactic. So here we have shopping, text ads, and discovery. With the last year budget revenue, ROAS and revenue contribution. So again, main things to pay attention to are the return on ad spend and the revenue contribution. So like we said in account, how ROAS was missing, here is a perfect example of how the budget allocated or the revenue driven is not necessarily the same, reflected in the ROAS and the revenue contribution. So we can see that a lot of the budget from last year went into text ads, but text ads actually had a lower return on ad spend than shopping ads. So what we want to do this time around is we want to allocate more budget to shopping because it had a higher revenue contribution. So these are the type of things that you need to think about when it comes to forecasting, largely because return on ad spend is a very, very big metric to work to and to consider when you're doing a forecast, especially if your client is, looking for revenue and sales, because that shows them how to do so, drive more revenue and sales in a very efficient manner. So, forecast done, basically. What we want to do now is sense check the data. So, once again, as we did in the beginning when we're validating our data set, we want to identify if there's any spikes in the forecast by comparing to historical data. If there are abnormalities that are contextually significant, then we just want to run with these, normalize it with the data in the forecast, and then if not, we want to dig into this and see why this happened. Usually, sometimes it's human error, especially when there's loads of forecasts, there's a lot of formulas available and used in the metrics. Sometimes you might have input the wrong budget, for example, or you might have missed something in a formula and it's just calculating things wrong. So just best to check everything, not just the data itself, but the formula that's populating it. So best source of contextual significance. This is Google Trends search demand taken for fans, because I thought this was a really good example, largely because we had a massive heat wave last year where temperatures hit about 30 degrees. Sometimes they were a bit higher than that in some places. And this really skewed search demand for this particular category. So we can see here, for example, there could be a data spike and there could be slight abnormalities in the data that we're seeing, just because rather than having a main spike, I think that's probably around June, July time, we had a longer period of heat in 2022, you can see just because it doesn't match up directly with the 2021 data, as well as 2 additional spikes. So that just shows that you need to actually contextualize the data and dig into why things happened, just to make your forecast more accurate. You can take this into account in the numbers. So, main takeout here is that your forecast is a living document. So anything that changes on your client side, anything that you want to amend contextually that can affect your performance will largely affect your forecast as well. So say your client, for example, you guys have an overspend and you have reduced budget for the coming months because of the overspend. That's going to affect your sales numbers, your revenue numbers, and that will affect your forecast as well. So you have to come back and reforecast. Or if, for example, your client has a very good month and they hit their sales target, they may want to reduce the sales target going forward. That also affects your forecast. So don't just think it's something that you put away and you never touch again. It's definitely something that you continuously look at and you amend when there's like more data that comes to light and more context that comes to light. So key takeouts from this. A lot of people get scared of forecasting because they don't want to be wrong. And the perfect way to not be wrong is to underpromise and overdeliver. So when you're doing your forecast, take into account contextual factors, but also you don't want to just do too much with it, because ideally the forecast is a benchmark that your client is going to hold the performance to. So you need to make sure that this benchmark is realistic, and you can do this by underpromising and over-delivering. However, don't do it too much, because there still needs to be value in your forecast. If your forecast is too under or too over, your client's not going to find it useful, and there's just no point in it. So bear that in mind. And then do sense check all the data. Like we said, data is the building block of everything that we do in a forecast. So we need to make sure that our data is valid, it's trustworthy, because this basically improves the forecast accuracy. Don't be afraid to leverage Google or any media owners that you work with, just because they have access to wider insights, to wider benchmarks that can help you forecast for competition in the coming months. Or if, for example, there's like a trending category or something that's growing in prominence that your client is dabbling in, they can definitely give you this information and make your forecast more accurate that way, just because it provides additional future context. Don't be afraid to get around it either. A lot of people think just forecasting is a lot of numbers and there's loads of layers to it, and there is. But you shouldn't be scared of it, because one, you have an automated base forecast table, and it just improves the accuracy of your forecast. But however, granularity is a bit of a double-edged sword, because the more granular you get, the longer your forecast takes. So just bear that in mind. I'd definitely say balance it, because time, as we all know, is something that we don't really have too much of as PPCers. And then lastly, and most important point, don't be afraid to reforecast, because contextual changes, any changes really, can impact your forecast. You want to make sure that it's up to date, it keeps in line with everything that's going on and affecting your performance, because Again, it improves the accuracy, and you always have to, remember that it is a benchmark that your client holds the performance to. So you want to make that as realistic as possible. But yeah, that's everything from me.